Hello and welcome to Journey Lines, the podcast answering the question, how did they get there? Each episode, my guest completes a reflective exercise, plotting key moments of their life against a line of neutrality. And together, we explore the highs, lows, and everything in between to get them where they are today. So with that, I am so thrilled to introduce today's guest, PJ Metz. PJ, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
I'm so excited to be here, Kim. Like, legit, like, as soon as you asked me, you're like, do you want to talk about yourself online? I was like, that's the only thing I want to do. Give me another avenue.
I mean, that's the whole hypothesis of this podcast, is that people want to talk about where they've been.
We love it. It's our favorite thing to do.
Oh my gosh. Well, before we dive into your history, which I'm so excited to chat through, tell me what you're up to today, personally, professionally. What's going on in PJ's life?
Yeah, well, I am really hitting like the ramp up part of my new job. I started that GitHub education back in February. And so yesterday was the 4-month anniversary of my start date. And so I keep thinking to myself, I'm starting to be in charge of things. And when people ask questions, they go, oh yeah, that's PJ. And I go, oh, that's me?
Okay.
Yeah, okay. And I just put it on my to-do list and I'm like, I'm going to need some time to get back to you. But I'm starting to get into the sort of deeper parts of running this program I run called Campus Experts, where we take students around the world at universities and colleges who apply to our program and they become little community managers on their campus. And we help them put on events and hackathons and workshops, and we bring them over to events that we're running too. We're like, oh, would you like to participate in this event we're running in Milan? And the person we have in Milan is like, yeah, I can go, and we help them get there and stuff like that. So I'm into, like, it's not the weeds, but like I'm getting into like the nitty gritty of it. I'm like, oh, I have expense reports to approve, and oh, I have like events to approve, and I have this, that, and the other to do. So it's scary because I'm finally seeing the responsibility that is going to be laid on my shoulders. But it's exciting because I feel like I'm going to have a sense of doing it a good way that benefits the students. And my theory has always been, if I do good for my students and my community, that's good for the company, because that's what they hired me to do. The company doesn't want me to worry about other stuff. They don't want me to worry about the stock price. They don't want me to worry about shareholder value. They're like, your job is to make these campus experts happy and to make sure that they're doing really well. Go do it. And I'm like, okay, let's go do it, I guess. We'll see.
And you're 4 months in. You're like barely even off onboarding yet. I think it takes 6 months to even know which way is up when you're onboarding. So like 4 months in and you're doing all of this. Congratulations. Absolutely amazing. And I can't wait to see what happens in a year and 4 months.
Me too. It's a big mystery.
Big mystery. Well, before we pine over the future too much, why don't we go ahead and start diving into your journey line for those watching? We can pull it up on the screen, and we've got it right here. So PJ, here's your journey line. Why don't you start us at the beginning? It's a very good place to start. And give us a little bit of, where we are in time and space and what's happening.
Yeah. So, and it's funny because the first step of my journey line is truly the fifth step in what I consider like the important things that happened to me.
Sure.
And I started with, I realized while I was at Florida that I wanted to be a teacher. And I didn't realize it before I went to the University of Florida. Actually, it was my junior year. I had switched my major twice already. I wasn't forced into a major I hated, but they gave me 2 options and I picked one and I ended up not liking it. I was on my way to an anthropology class.
Wait, what was that first major? Oh, anthropology.
The first major was environmental science, and then I failed chemistry and went, maybe science isn't for me, so I went undecided. After the second year of undecided, they said, okay, you have to pick something now. And they said, oh, you can pick history or you can pick anthropology because you're on track for either of those. And I was like, anthropology, I guess. I should have picked history, I found out later, because when I graduated, if I had taken one more history course, I would have ended up with a history minor, like accidentally.
So close.
So close. Yeah, instead I was doing anthropology and I hated that course. And no shade to like people who like anthropology. I couldn't I couldn't get into it. It wasn't exciting for me. And so I'm on my way to a course I hate. I just left a course that I loved. It was a survey of American literature since the 1860s. I was into it. Every discussion I was involved, and it never felt difficult to be in that class. I always enjoyed every second of it. So I was like, man, like I hate leaving a class I like for one I don't like. And I was like, I wish I could just get paid to read books. And I literally like stopped walking and I went, that's what teachers do. And I skipped the anthropology class. Yeah, I was like, oh,
you skipped it. They didn't even go.
I skipped that class. I was like, I don't care. As long as I get a C in it, my GPA is going to be fine. I went to the College of Education and I said, if I wanted to be a high school teacher for English, what should I do? And she goes, you should major in English, like go get a bachelor's in English, and then come do this program called ProTeach. And that was a grad school program that was 1 year. And at the end of it, I got a teaching certificate. I took all these tests. I learned how to write curriculum. I always tell people my first degree was in reading poetry. My second degree was in teaching poetry. And this was like I said, it's the fifth step because there's a bunch of earlier, should I go to Florida? What should I do with my life? How am I going to blah, blah, blah. But deciding to be a teacher was this moment where I think I really felt my compass really point somewhere for the first time.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I will say our journey lines crossed very early in life.
It's true.
And literature has been a shining value in your life. I feel like we've talked poetry. And I love that that's how you found it. What an incredible way. Now, if I remember correctly, you got moderately famous at the University of Florida.
I became moderately viral for two different reasons, both involving sports. Yeah, it happened.
There are some great gifts out there. They're hard to find. I went to go find them. They were a little tough.
I discovered that Florida fan dancing tends to bring it up. And it's easier to find in like the Facebook Messenger gift search than anywhere else for some reason.
All right. Well, if any internet sleuths are down for that, it's out there. Okay, so you're at Florida. You've done your graduate degree now.
Yep.
We'll pull up your journey line. And where are we going from here?
Down. It goes straight down to a crying apple. And the reason that this happens is that I moved to Melbourne, Florida. The person I was dating at the time was living there. I had graduated. I wanted to be a teacher. And I was like, I guess I'm going to go live in the same city as the person I'm dating. Like we had been together for like 3 years at that point. That made sense. So I get there and I'm sending resumes to Brevard County schools. I'm sending resumes to individual schools and no one is saying yes. And I'm starting to get really nervous. At the time, while I was in college, I worked at a TGI Fridays bartending and serving. And I actually did every job at that Fridays. I tried the kitchen and I failed miserably, and the kitchen made fun of me a lot for it. It was amazing. Amazing. Like every time the kitchen would see me when I went back to serving, they were like, PJ, don't come in the kitchen. It's scary back here. And I was like, yeah, I know. I'm terrible.
Flames, sharp objects. It's not a safe
sandwiches. Place. It's scary. But when I moved to Melbourne, in order to have income, I transferred to a TGI Fridays there. But the one in Melbourne was franchised, and so I couldn't transfer. I would have just had to apply again, and I was like, no, I'll take an immediate job. And that one was in Merritt Island, which for those of you who don't know Florida geography is a 45-minute drive north. So I was driving 45 minutes to work a shift. It was a dead restaurant. I made $35 a shift there sometimes. Like,
don't forget your $2.13 an hour.
Gosh, I did forget that. My random paycheck every 2 weeks for another $17.
Well, I don't want to dwell on the hard times too much, but sure. I myself found bartending as a little stopgap in between professions. Mm-hmm. From your perspective, hot question. Ooh. How can I get a bartender to like me? You want the extra pour? You want... What is the one thing, if I pull up to your bar and sit down, how do I impress PJ the bartender?
Just normal conversation is what does it. And that's what I do for other bartenders now too. In fact, I was at a work function last night and I spent as much time talking to the bartenders as I did my colleagues. Because
Same.
there's a camaraderie there, right? I know this and I know you're interesting because I've never met an uninteresting bartender ever.
No. And if they are, they'll just fake it anyway, so it's fine.
Right?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of sitting at the bar. If you're out there and you haven't just sat at a bar and chatted up a bartender, go hear some stories.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're bartending. We're in Melbourne.
Yep.
We're driving to Merritt Island.
We are driving to Merritt Island. Eventually, I get a bartending job much closer, but I still can't get a teaching gig. I moved to Melbourne in August, and I did not catch the break into teaching until November. And
you had graduated in May, so we're like
no, there was a summer where I was still doing school, so it was July was my last classes. I moved there in August, and I was expecting to kind of be there in the beginning of the school year, and it wasn't until I think November 3rd was my first day teaching.
Okay.
But I had my partner at the time had said, "Hey, I was also looking. I saw that O'Galley just posted an English teacher position, and O'Galley High School had been like, all right, like we just need someone to come in because one of our teachers is taking medical leave, and we need someone to fill in for the rest of the semester." I was on it. I brought my printed out resume. I said, "Oh, I'm just dropping this off. I'd love to be considered for the position. Thank you so much." And I got in my car and I drove back to Gainesville, Florida, because the TGI Fridays there was like, we're having a Halloween party, and PJ, you used to host all of our parties and trivia. Would you come back and do it for like $100? And I was like, I need $100. So I drove back to Gainesville, which is 3 hours, to host the Halloween party. On the drive there, the vice principal of O'Galley calls me and goes, "Oh, we're very interested in talking to you. Do you have time today?" And I was like, "Oh, I can't. I'm on my way to DJ a party." Hold on, I didn't say that. What I mean is, and I had to like explain what I meant.
I mean, great way to kick off the relationship. Love it. So I can only imagine at this point the principal is this is the man I want. This is
this guy. He's DJing Halloween parties. He's perfect for 9th grade English honors.
Yeah, he's slinging drinks at bars. He's throwing parties. Come teach English.
For sure. It's a natural progression. But yeah, they actually did. I interviewed the next Monday, and they said they were interested, and I came in, and that bare foot in the door of you're only here till the end of the semester, maybe halfway through November, just before Thanksgiving, they were like, "Hey, we want to figure out a way to keep you for next semester too."
Perfect.
That's all I needed. The opportunity to show them that I was serious and I was really going to be good at it. And they were nice enough to give that to me. And really a lot of the rest of my journey is on someone saying, "All right, we'll give you a chance." And I come in and I knock it out of the park.
I mean, what more can you ask for when given a chance, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's the whole goal.
If you're up at the plate, you got to take a swing.
100%. Okay, so we are living life at O'Galley, teaching English.
Yeah.
2009 to 2012.
Yeah, there is a school switch there where I moved to Orlando around 2013, I think.
Okay.
But I really grouped all of just being a teacher into, it's a high point on the graph, but underneath it, I put a bunch of stressed out people.
Tell me more.
That is teaching. It's these really, really high moments of a student that really gets it, that gets excited about something, that goes from not participating to participating. And then there's just the endless difficulty of students that you're not reaching, of difficult home situations, and, the reality of being a mandatory reporter for CPS and families. And like the O'Galley area in Melbourne is a very blue collar area, and especially post 2008, I believe we had like something like 85% of our students were on like free and reduced lunch. Wow. So like it was a Title I school. It was a very like a population that has struggled historically, and that came with a lot of difficulties. And even when I moved to Orlando, I was teaching at a private school. you would think that those issues that you encounter in a Title I school would be much less prevalent, but I had just as many issues like that at the private schools I did, because families and children are families and children everywhere. And it was extreme highs and extreme lows all the way throughout my teaching career, and wouldn't change it for the world. There's so much that came with it. But it was full of moments like me literally looking like that person in the thing, holding my head, just like I've got a book, and this person's clearly studying, but like imagine those are 100 essays to grade on The Great Gatsby there instead.
Yeah. How do you balance that, right? Like, you're a teacher, you see these kids 5 days a week for 8 hours, maybe less.
Yeah.
Like, how does that, and you still have a job to do.
Yeah. I'm going to say, as a teacher, it was just never balanced. Like, you get to like winter break and it kind of like stops, and you go, and you can take like a second and breathe, and then it starts again. And then you get to summer break. And for me, I always got another job during the summer. So when people are like, oh, teachers get summers off, it's like, I mean, kind of like, I just spent my time looking for another gig. I was still getting all the schools I taught at had it where your paycheck went through the summer. So I was getting the same amount every month, but I was like, it was never a lot. Like, especially the person I was dating in Melbourne, and we broke up, and I started living on my own. And now I'm like responsible for the apartment and all the bills and everything. And on a teacher's salary, I remember I was struggling, like really struggling. And that's why I ended up moving in with a friend of mine over there and using a spare room in his place. Way better situation.
Way better. Love that. So you have been looking at your journey line. You've taught for a long time, 2009 to 2021 total. And right in the center, I see a beautiful Korean flag. Let's talk a little bit about that stop in your journey.
Yes. And going to Korea is one of the highest points on my graph too, because it was a transformative experience for me and my now wife. We went together. Started dating her while I was in Melbourne, moved to Orlando where she was living. And it was maybe 2014. She says, I've always thought about teaching abroad. I was like, oh, me too. Like, when I graduated grad school, if I hadn't been dating someone, I was just going to go to Japan and teach English over there. And she was like, oh, I've always thought about Korea. And I was like, I haven't, but let's think about it. And we started considering it. And we started looking into it. And we eventually decided to apply to a couple programs. We ended up finding a recruiter. The recruiter found us jobs over there. And it was full of amazing experiences and true tests of your ability to handle life as well. It's really fun to be there, and I still love going back to Korea. But there were moments where culturally I felt at odds, because it is a different culture. And as westernized as the area I was living in was, signs are in English, every restaurant has English signs, and like, you can go a whole year in Korea and never have to speak any Korean. I think it's rude, but you can make it happen. And so there were these ups and downs of, I'm so excited to be here. This is amazing. I don't understand what's happening. I can't figure out my bank. I don't know how to get help when I need it. My phone doesn't work anymore. I don't know who to go to about that. I need a doctor. How do I find a doctor here? I can barely find a doctor in the States, let alone in the country. No. Right. It's just difficult. So it's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful experience. And whenever anyone asks, I'm like, go to Korea, go to Busan. It's one of the best places in the world. And teaching there, I wasn't teaching high schoolers anymore. I was teaching kindergartners and elementary school kids. So I went from, how does John Proctor act as a fill-in for Arthur Miller in The Crucible, to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It's very different.
I mean, you're not going to get to The Crucible without knowing the days of the week. So
I tell you what,
a little earlier on in the English.
By the end of the year, I had them analyzing E.E. Cummings and postmodernist masters. Easy peasy. These first graders had amazing insights into the post-war poetry period.
I'm sure. I'm sure. And so how long were you in Korea? I think I missed that.
A year and a half. So we
A
got
year and a
there.
half.
We went
Okay.
there in August 2015, and we came back to the States in about April 2017.
Oh my gosh. Amazing. Okay. So
Yeah.
we're back in the States. We've gone to
Mhm.
Korea. And you still go, correct? Like you
I have friends that are still there, very close friends that are still there. I got
nice.
to go back in December for even just a weekend because I had to go to a different country for a work event. And I saw that there were layovers available in Seoul. And I was like, what if I do a really long layover in Korea and go see my friends? And my boss was like, sure, yeah, just get to the event on time. I was like, all right, I can do.
Be at the offsite. Just be at the offsite.
Yeah, just be there, man. All right, I can do it.
All right.
Yeah.
So we go to Korea, 18 months, have a great time, come
Mhm.
home, keep teaching till
Yep.
2021.
Yep.
And then
Yep.
we have our next event.
Yeah, and to add time to this one, we've got coronavirus, which was obviously terrible for everyone and continues to be terrible. um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but right early in that is when uh, I don't know if you know this guy. His name's Brandon Minnick. Um,
I do know him. For those who
okay.
might not be familiar, this is my husband, and he, not unlike PJ, has an aggressive love for teaching.
Yeah, so we are in May of 2020, so very early days of the pandemic. I always like to reference it as, when we were still wiping down groceries because we thought that it was surface to surface. Putting Amazon boxes in the garage for 3 days just to let them air out. I
Sure.
don't know why I thought that would help, but I did it.
We
So
were all making some choices then.
yeah, we didn't know what was happening. I remember
That's
one
fine.
time the U.S. Surgeon General was like, "You can use a T-shirt as a mask," and I was like, "Where are we right now? Like, what is this world?" Ugh,
Stuff started getting weird real quick,
it got
but
weird. But Zoom happy
outside of
hours.
Zoom happy hours became a really big thing. And I think a lot of people can relate of just like, I don't know, it's hour 97 in my house. I got a grocery delivery and it's got a bottle of wine.
I
Somebody get
can
on a
I
screen
can
with me.
I can only do so much karaoke with just my partner in the house before I start to crack. I need to see another human.
Yeah,
Um,
literally anyone else talk.
yeah, and it was
So
it was
Zoom happy
our
hours.
it was our group of friends from Melbourne who since 2009 2010 had been scattered across the states, and this was a really cool way for us to actually get back together and hang out again. So in one of those, one of our friends was working at Red Hat as I think a solutions engineer, and he was like, "Oh, I just found out I'm being underpaid. There's someone else at my same level, and they're making like 50K more a year than me." And I was like, "That's insanity. That's also more
Yeah.
than I make in a year." And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, I can't believe I know someone who is like, this person makes more than me, and the difference between their salaries was 50K. And I knew engineers got paid, but I didn't know it was like that at all. So
Yeah, I'm going to take a quick pause here. Just remind everyone teachers are drastically underpaid and
massively,
transparent compensation is a great practice.
please
Please
do talk about
can
your pay.
talk about your pay. So, as someone is talking about their pay, you hear that they are underpaid by more than your salary. What
Mhm.
happens?
I make a big deal out of it. I always saw myself. I was one of like the few, and I know you kind of related this too. One of the few non-engineer, techie type people in that group of friends. A lot of them worked for the same like big engineering communications company, and I always felt not different because our friends are great and super inclusive, but I always felt there was a very different lifestyle between me and my friends. And so it put that in kind of a stark reality. And I made a joke about it because coping. Um, but it did strike me as like a moment where I was like, I don't know that this pay is going to get better. I was teaching in
Mm.
Florida, 48th in the union for teacher pay. Currently, actually, last place, I think, for teacher pay overall. And I remember thinking that like I felt like I deserved more than that for the work I was doing. And it it didn't hurt because teachers don't get into it for the pay. And that's why on the journey line, I put teaching as a work of heart at the bottom. But the caveat to that is that Starbucks gift cards can't pay my rent. And I appreciated every time I got a gift card or something from a student, but like, thank you so much for helping my child. They really accomplished a lot this year. Did not pay my electricity. So it felt great and it made me feel really good as a human. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. But I did start thinking, all right, am I going to be able to like retire one day? Am I going to be able to live comfortably? Or do I just do this until I fall over? At that moment when I made a joke about it and I told everyone that's what I made in a year, Brandon speaks up and he goes, you know, PJ, and I don't remember if he did it in the Zoom or privately. It might have been privately. He goes, you know, I do this thing called developer relations. And it's a lot like teaching. Like I'm teaching people how to use a product that my company makes. And I was like, okay, neat. And he goes,
great for you, pal.
Yeah, super cool. I was like, actually, like it is neat. Like, I'm like, that's great. And he goes, I feel like you would be great at it. And I said, I don't know. I know what your old job was. It was working on communication satellites on cruise ships. And that sounds complicated as hell. So I didn't think that it was actually possible. I was like, I can't do what Brandon does. He's brilliant. He knows what's up. And he kind of like, he pushed back in a way that not
he's
a lot
aggressive.
of friends would. He is. He's like, no. Like, really, here. He goes, here, look, this is what Dev Rel makes at Microsoft. And I was like, oh, shit, really? And he was like, and I really think you can do it. And I'd love to work with you on that if you like. He literally goes, I got nothing going on this summer. I was like, well, of course I got nothing going on this summer.
Reminder, we're in the middle of COVID. No one had anything going on.
Nothing. Like barely leaving the house still at this point, you know? This is like pre-mask debates. This is when they weren't even recommending masks. They would just stay the hell home.
Yeah, just stay home. And even in the summer, we were just at like circles in the park and you had to hang out.
Oh my God, like making a circle and being like, all right, you're allowed to hang out here.
Yep.
Wild. What a time.
So y'all had Sundays free?
We certainly had Sundays free. We start meeting up on Sundays. He sends me a video of this amazing man from Microsoft called Scott Hanselman, who's like a legend in the C# world and in Dev Rel and tech in general. And I watched this video and followed along and wrote my first hello world. And it printed to the screen. And I saw that code I wrote did something. And I went, oh, that is cool. Yeah. And I immediately went to watch the rest of the videos in the series. And I come back to Brandon maybe a few days later. And I go, hey, do you have like more resources or videos? I finished those. He goes, what do you mean you finished those? I go, oh, I watched them all. And he goes, oh, so you are interested. I go, yeah, man, let's do it. And he agreed that he would meet with me once a week and talk about what I was learning, and I would go and find a resource where I could learn to code. And it is such a flash point in my life that this guy who I only met because I moved to Melbourne, and I was only in Melbourne because I was dating a girl who moved to Melbourne, and I only went to Florida to date that girl because a guidance counselor said, have you considered Florida? And I only met that girl because I was in marching band. And all of that coalesced into a single moment where Brandon says, I think you can be in tech. And it's a straight line from there to having GitHub stuff on my wall and working for GitHub Education, which we'll get to later in the journey.
Yeah, we'll get there. Don't skip ahead.
Yeah, there's a different Git company first.
So you and Brandon spend lots of Sundays coding.
Like there were sometimes it was 5 hours we were on a call together working on a website or something. It was massive.
For, I want to say, like well over a year. Like this wasn't like a few... Brandon and I moved. I remember him like Sundays during the move getting on. Yeah, this was an intensive self-directed learning for you with like a hand up from somebody else.
Yeah.
So that year-ish goes by.
Mm-hmm.
You're still teaching.
Still teaching. So the summer was obviously easy. I had not much else to do. I did have to complete a training because the school asked me if I would teach AP Lang the next year. And it was my first AP course that I was going to be teaching. Okay. And so I had to do this training online. So that was taking up time and I had work for that as well. But I was still coding and learning and doing all that stuff. the school year starts, and I don't know if I'm actually going to switch careers. Like, for a long time, I was like, if all that comes out of this is I learn to code and I can write an app that makes it easier for students to like get a bathroom pass and not have to interrupt me during the class to ask me to go to the bathroom. Because y'all are 17, stop asking me to go to the bathroom. Just like, I want an app that says, I'm going to the bathroom, check out, check in. And then I can be like, okay, you spent 4 minutes there. Good. That's
There's
perfect.
your tech company.
If y'all are looking for $1 billion idea, digital bathroom passes. I was just using a Google form for a long time.
So funny.
But it ends up being like, I'm teaching an AP class for the first time. I'm doing this in the middle of the pandemic. It's a hybrid system at the school I taught at. So I had students in front of me, surrounded by plexiglass, all wearing masks. I'm in a mask. I have students on Zoom, who I'm also responsible for. I'm trying to find a way to be able to actually look at the kids on Zoom while I'm lecturing, but still have it connected to the camera so that they can see me, because there's a camera for the classroom. I invest in like headphones that also have a microphone, but sometimes those malfunction and kids are like, Mr. Metz, you sound like you're in a washing machine. And I'm like, is this better? And they're like, no, it's not better. We can't hear you. It wasn't a disaster, but it was extremely like, it was a lot more overhead to think about. Mm-hmm. And still, it'd be like lunch. I'd go and grab my lunch. I'd sit down and I would open Codecademy and I would work on something.
Amazing.
And I would just like be like, I don't get methods. This sucks. And I would like mess with it again. And then the bell would ring and I'd be like, God damn. All right. Hi, come in. Oh, rather, hi, come in. Thank you.
I mean, and I think you can talk to most engineers. They love nothing more than being interrupted when they're really trying to focus on the flow. Oh, don't interrupt the flow. Okay. So you're teaching, you're getting in some of these lessons, lunch breaks, Saturdays, Sundays. And then
Brandon starts introducing me to people.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. I meet people. Someone online finds me, and this is starting the descent, but it was really quicker than it looks right now. The absolute lowest point on my journey lines. I was introduced to someone on Twitter. Her name's Tessa. She was working at a company called Fast. She was their first Dev Rel hire, Dev Rel manager position. And they said, hey, hire someone else under you for docs and like another Dev Rel. Maybe they can do some stuff for us. And I interviewed with like 4 different people. And eventually I get an offer from them. I call you, actually. You're like the first person to know about it because Brandon was so involved in my journey. And Kim, you were giving me advice as well from like, like really helping me understand a perspective that I had zero knowledge on, just nothing. So I call y'all. I tell you I signed it. I'm so excited. I'm ready. It's more money than I've ever seen in my life. I'd sign it on a Saturday.
You celebrate.
Oh my God. I think I
told people.
I tell everybody. I immediately ordered a bottle of like nice whiskey to send to Brandon to say thank you. I get there to school Monday. I go to my principal, who's someone I had known since like 2012. And I tell her I'm putting in my 2 weeks. She's excited because she knows I've been working towards this. I get home, and at 7 p.m. that night, I get an email from Fast that says they're rescinding the offer. And I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, we're no longer going to have this position. We're very sorry for any confusion. I was like, I don't know what you mean confusion. I signed a contract. And I remember looking at it being like, is there anything in here about, nope, it's a right to work contract. So
it's crushing.
Nothing. And I had to tell my wife, I was like, hey, not only is that tech job not happening anymore, I put in my 2 weeks today. And the next day was proctoring the ACT for the entire junior class at the school. Casual. So it wasn't a real day. I had to, like, you can get audited. Like, and I think auditors were there that day to make sure we were doing it correctly. There's very
and you're just not in this headspace. This is not.
I'm devastated. I'm having to go, the ACT is a test that will assess your ability to read, write, do, and you have to read it verbatim. And I've got a gym full of like 100 students, all 6 feet apart from each other. It was just a very difficult day. And I can't talk to the principal that day because she's stressed about making the ACT work. And so I finally get to her Wednesday, and she's like, I'm like, is there any chance that like I can stay. And she goes, we filled the job immediately because of COVID. We had to have people in the wings ready to take over at a moment's notice.
Because of COVID. So you tried to go back
I
to
did. I was
teaching.
like,
You were like, well, and I get that. Like, I think especially in the last few years, unfortunately, we've seen a lot of shitty moves by companies, offers rescinded, layoffs, like these very scary. In your case, I have made a huge life decision.
Right.
And now I just had the rug pulled out from under me. Yeah. And I want to go back, but I can't.
And now it's like, okay, she's like, as agreed upon. She's like, whenever you tell me, the Friday of that week will be your last day. And that's what we agreed upon, like, I think back in like December when I told her I was thinking I might leave early. I was like, I'll try not to. But if an offer comes through, I want you to know that it's a possibility. She's like, all right, that's fine. She was super supportive. She's an amazing principal. She actually is leaving the school this year, and she's becoming the superintendent for the whole diocese there now. And it's fantastic. It couldn't happen to a better person. But she goes, listen, PJ, I know this sucks and I know it's hard. She goes, I also know you, and you're going to be fine. And I really know that. And I was like, thank you. And I'll do my best. And that Friday was the last day of the third quarter. My first class of the day was AP Lang. They come in. I'm like, all right, we need to look at the rest of the quarter. We got AP tests coming up in 3 months. After that is finals. The rest of this quarter is one big project. All right. And I laid out the project, and there's like 10 minutes left in class. And I go, and by the way, today's my last day. And there was like an audible like gasp in the room. A couple kids cried. They were like, what do you mean you're leaving? And I was like, look, I get it. It's AP. It's scary, but like, y'all are going to be fine. And that's down there is offer rescinded, but also like, I felt awful leaving school, and I didn't have the, but I'm leaving for something better. I also couldn't really say the truth because I was scared of some kind of like backlash from FAST. Like, I didn't want to go and I didn't want to tell everybody that they'd rescinded it, because I was like, well, then what if word gets around in tech that I badmouth people, and what if they're mad at me? And like, I was like, okay, so I'm just going to say I'm leaving teaching because I've been learning to code, and I really need to focus on that in order to be successful. And I'm very sorry, but I am going to leave. And that was my story.
And then you get in.
Oh, man, did I coming home that Friday, I think my wife was like, look, just take the weekend. We're going to hang out. We're going to chill. And on Monday, you can get started. I was like, yeah, sure. And Monday, I just started throwing applications everywhere I could. I took like a technical writing course because I was like, at least it'll prove that I can be a technical writer if I need to. Like, that felt like a more natural, maybe someone wants a great writer to help out. I was applying to junior developer roles, senior developer roles, junior Dev Rel, I applied to a staff Dev Rel one time. Nowhere near qualified for it. I was like, but maybe they see me and they're like, oh, maybe he could come in and learn something. I don't know. Like, it wouldn't be staff, but it'd be something. Just throwing applications everywhere I could, meeting people online, cold reaching out to people. In that time, my other mentor that Brandon introduced to me, Chloe Condon, she started reaching out to her network as well. And her and Brandon are both going, hey, is anyone hiring? Is anyone looking for a new dev role? I got this guy. And they just start sending me introductions. You should meet this person. You should. And I just say yes to
Smile
everything.
And say yes. Smile and say yes.
I got an interview one time. They were like, it's Web3. I was like, oh, blockchain, neato. And they're like, yeah. Like, what do you know about it? I go, not much yet, but
I'm going to know a lot real soon.
Yeah.
And you and Chloe, I recall, had a podcast with the sole intention of getting rid of the podcast.
Yes. It was called The Show Must Go Off, and then in parentheses, The Air. And the goal was to cancel the show, but we could only cancel the show once I got a job. And we started it in like November the previous year, but it was half tongue-in-cheek, half real. But we were very specifically talking about like reading job applications or reading job descriptions together, building skills, showing off what we're making, and this, that, and the other. And when we got to, it was March 5th. No, I forget. It was March. And now the show must go off the air is very serious. I'm like, no, I need a job now. We got to do it. Meeting people, everything I can do, whatever I can make happen. And eventually someone from GitLab messages me and says, hey, I've seen you around on Twitter. I looked you up and looked into your background. And we have this position called education evangelist that we're opening up here. And I'm wondering if you'd be interested. Delightful. And I'm like, education, you say? I didn't know anything about GitLab. I knew GitHub because Brandon had been teaching me how to use GitHub while I was learning to code. And so I was like, okay, so it's got to be similar, right? So that recruiter goes, here's the link. Go ahead and apply. I'll also put in a word. I'll let them know that I found you and you seem qualified at least for like just the screening call at least.
Mm-hmm.
So, do the screening call, go through a couple interviews with people on what ends up being the community relations team. And then they say, thanks so much. We're looking to make a decision in about 3 weeks. And I was like, all right, thank you. They're like, you're like the first to really go through. So it'll be some time.
Love hearing that, don't you? You're like,
I'm like, I'm first. Great. And it's never like, you're never the actual measuring stick for everyone else. You're always like is that who we're getting? All right, let's see. Yeah. So I continue applying other places. I continue doing a few screening calls here and there. And one day I went out for a walk because in pandemics, what do you do but walk? I went out for a walk and I stopped by a Dunkin' Donuts near me. And this Dunkin' Donuts was more chaotic than any other Dunkin' Donuts I've ever been to. But I noticed the chaos and I was like, are y'all hiring? And the lady behind the counter goes, seriously? And I was like, yeah, I'm kind of between jobs right now. And I'm getting to a point where I'm about to start losing money. Like I did the math and the break even point for my wife and I was like, I want to say mid-May-ish, early May. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, like we're going to start eating into savings now. So I need something, even if it's just bringing in like $600 a month.
Just something to keep us going.
Yeah, I'm like, I can handle the grocery bills if I can get $600 a month, you know? And so I did. I picked up an application at Dunkin' Donuts. I continued on my walk. And while I was on the walk, I got an email from GitLab that said, congratulations, we'd love to have you join our team. And I lost my mind.
So begins a new journey.
And then at the same time, I'm like, are they going to rescind it too?
Terrifying, right? Like,
are they going to realize that I'm a mistake?
Once bitten, twice shy.
Man, absolutely.
But they didn't. They prominently displayed on your journey line.
Yeah.
If not with a quick ending.
It was fantastic. It still feels like they gave me a chance.
Yes.
That's what it was. And it does. I loved my time there. It was fantastic. I met a lot of really important people to me personally and professionally. But they did layoffs in February of 2023. So I started GitLab in May 2021. Yes, because my first Hello World was 358 days before my first day at GitLab.
Great.
Totally
so
normal
you're at
trajectory.
GitLab until these layoff bug. A lot of us have been bitten since 2020. But then...
And it was shocking, but literally the same week, a former colleague at GitLab reaches out and goes, hey, I'm at this company called Project Discovery. It's cybersecurity. And I had actually been talking to him about when he left for this company the November prior. And I was like, I'm so excited for you, man. And he was like, security is going to be a big deal soon. And shortly after that, GitLab changed their slogan from the DevOps platform to the DevSecOps platform. And they were like, we need to start talking about security. And everyone around me started talking about security all of a sudden. I was like, this is important. So I started reading more about it. And I was like, oh my God, like, yeah, this is going to be a big deal. So he reaches out to me and he goes, look, there's a lot of work here and I need a community manager. While I was at GitLab, I took a course from a group called the C School, all about community management. Cool. And he was like, I remember you took a course. Would you be able to do community manager? And I was like, yes. And so
yes. Smile and say yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And except this time I actually was confident that I could do it because I was like, I did learn about this one at least. It's way better than being like, yeah, I know what DevOps is. And I did not. So he says to me like a few weeks later, he goes like, yeah, you're in. Like, let's do it. And so I had severance from GitLab and a new job that started like barely a month later. And I was like, this couldn't have gone better. And that's why it's like vertical.
Perfect.
Like it happened almost the exact same time, layoffs and getting that job.
I love that. I mean, may we all be so fortunate. And what a great reminder to like really invest in those relationships with folks across your career. But project discovery is not where your line ends.
Sure isn't. In December, someone I met also through Brandon in the .NET community who happened to be working at GitHub. I see now I've said GitLab too many times. Happened to be working at GitHub. Reaches out, and I had actually done a show with him. He runs a .NET show for a group of .NET developers that are mostly concentrated in the Dominican Republic. So great. This guy Luis is unreal. He's one of the best people I've ever known in my life.
I'm a big fan of Luis.
Right?
I hear some of the podcasts.
So
amazing.
He says there's this position at GitHub Education. So like I mentioned earlier, I was at GitLab Education, working with students, teachers, etc. Every time I went to a conference with GitLab, GitHub Education was over there with the biggest booth I've ever seen, with like 12 employees in there, with the best stickers and swag, and just, it looked fun. And I remember being there and being like, man, how do you even get on that team? So I applied. Even in my mind, I was like, there's no way they're going to take me. Normally, they've got someone in mind. They have all these connections across the industry. There's no reason they would say yes to me. But I also knew, of course, I'm going to apply, because if I get a screening call, there's a chance I get to meet these people. And I can learn from them about what they're doing and what they're up to. And that's a connection that's not worth having for my career, because I don't think about connections in terms of worth having for my career. I think about connections with people who are passionate about what they're doing. And that's an exciting relationship to have. And I know everyone at GitHub Education was passionate about what they were doing. Yeah. So I had to meet them. That's why I applied to the job. I just wanted to meet these people.
And as we've said, you've been there 4 months. We've come full circle into your journey line, circle line.
The circle
We're starting
line.
back. The circle line. As you've reflected and thought about everything and think about, where you want to go next, whatever that might be. I'm not here to predict the future. What's a nugget you wish you would have known back at UF or back at TGI Fridays?
Oh my gosh. That the first step towards succeeding really is failing. And even until really recently, I found myself really upset at myself for not being able to do a thing. I even did it at the beginning of this call. I was like, I've been there 4 months and I've got all this stuff I need to do, but I need to be good at it. And like, you immediately reminded me, you're like, you're really not fully onboarded yet. Like, you're still learning and understanding, and it takes time. And like, I got so down on myself for not being able to do the thing perfectly the first time. And that's been a through line in my whole life, where like, either I get frustrated and I quit, or I get so mad that people around me don't want to hang out with me anymore for a little bit. Like, man, PJ's in a mood. Like, yeah, he was trying to learn C# methods earlier, so he's upset.
I am very much the person that's like, why isn't this perfect? I just started doing this 3 seconds ago. Like,
right.
The professionals make it so easy, which is literally their job.
But you have to fail first. As a reminder of that, my signature on my professional email, my GitHub email, is Bram Stoker, author of Dracula. And it says, we learn from failures, not success. Because once you succeed, there's clearly not much you had to learn to do it. But when you fail, you've got something that needs to be corrected. And so that's where learning happens. And that's where you actually grow. And growth is going to be painful, no matter what kind of growth it is. So if you can embrace that and know that in that first moment when you're just terrible at it, you go, yep, that's step 1. And then you do it again. And the first time you moderately improve at all, that's the feeling you end up chasing for a long time. And it's really exciting.
That is Beautiful. PJ, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for walking us through your journey line. For our listeners, check out the show notes. You can get a link to PJ's journey line and explore it with him as we talk through. Have a wonderful day, and I can't wait to see what your future holds.
Kim, thank you so much for having me. Bye, y'all.
Bye.